Picture this: your friends finally talk you into buying the new fighting game that came out. You go to the character select screen, pick whoever you think looks cool, and start the match. Since you haven't played a fighting game in a long time, you lose the match as fast as it started. You start to think to yourself, what did I do wrong? A lot of the time, new players to fighting games find themselves in this place of where they don't want to continue playing the game due to the learning curve of the game. But why are these fighting games so hard these days? Let's try to delve into the history of fighting games and see what changed and what steps you can take to make the experience a lot easier. As always, let's try to answer some questions. Number one, how have fighting games changed over time? Number two, what makes current fighting games so difficult for new players? And number three, what can you do to become a better player? How have fighting games changed over time? The days of easy to play button mash fighting games are not what people are into anymore. Players seem to crave learning their games inside and out to develop new strategies and techniques. Let's look at the history of one of the most popular fighting games, Street Fighter, and see how they've changed to suit their players. The first Street Fighter game introduced special attacks and set some of the standards in later fighting games. Things such as the 6 button controls and the use of command based special moves were completely ahead of their time. In this iteration of the series, the game was incredibly basic, so anyone could pick it up and have a good time. However, things really started to change when Street Fighter II was released in 1991. Street Fighter II improved many of the concepts introduced in the first game, including the use of special command based moves, combo system, 6 button configurations, and wider selection of playable characters, each with a unique fighting style. On top of that, this is where two-player mode was popularized, where players are made to have human to human competitive play. This completely changed how fighting games were played, and new players to the series had to learn all the different abilities each character had in their arsenal if they wanted to be successful. This made a huge learning curve for players to get over if they even wanted to play the game. Remember, this was back in the day where the games were in the arcades, so players had to put their quarters on the line if they wanted to keep playing. Let's just say money is a big motivator to getting good at something. To make this even harder though, combos in this game were incredibly difficult to pull off. You had to learn near frame perfect precision to pull most of these combos off. So seeing tournaments of players doing long combos are truly spectacular to see. The next sequel, the series Street Fighter 3, specifically Third Strike, came out of the gate swinging again with more things for players to learn. The most notable of them being the parry mechanic that could give players the ability to deflect any incoming attack without receiving damage. The parry was very risk heavy due to you having to press forward so you wouldn't be able to block, and you had to have a near perfect execution to parry an incoming attack. That alone is what makes moments like these so amazing to see. On top of the parry mechanic, just like in Street Fighter 2, combos in this game were very difficult to perform. This led players to spend a lot of time in training mode perfecting and honing their skills. And I know what you're probably thinking, were fighting games always this hard? And that isn't particularly wrong, but let's move forward and get to the next game in the series, Street Fighter 4. Street Fighter 4 added so many new mechanics, it's hard to keep track of all of them. For one, we have the Ultras, where we're basically special moves that can do massive damage to your opponents. And the bar for Ultras filled up as you lost health, so it's kind of like a comeback mechanic in that way. Next, we had the Focus, which is basically a lot like the parry system, but instead of deflecting attacks, you would super armor through incoming attacks, losing some health, and be able to perform a counter attack or a dash forward or dash back. This mechanic ended up being an extremely powerful defensive option as well as an offensive one to push the advantage with frame data. If you did like a fireball cancel forward, you'd be able to have advantage over your opponent, or to super armor away from approaching opponents and counter them for approaching you. As you can imagine, just like the games before it, combos were fairly difficult to pull off, but they still had easier options with target combos for newer players to get into it. Now, moving all the way to Street Fighter V, we see an abundance of new mechanics along with some of the core mechanics from the old games. We still have the 6 button attacks, special moves, and a huge roster of characters, but some things have changed as well. There's no more focus attack or ultra from Street Fighter 4. Instead, we have the V trigger mechanic. So we have a V gauge that can do a bunch of different things, such as the V trigger activate, V skill, V shift, and V reversal. The V skill was basically character specific moves that can do a variety of different things. Just to name some off, for Ryu, one of his V skills is parry. So it's basically like the parry from Third Strike, but a lot easier to pull off. As well as for the character Nash, they're able to absorb projectiles with their V skill. The V trigger, on the other hand, was a comeback mechanic that built up your V gauge when you took damage. So once you had that V gauge full, you were able to activate your V trigger, and these, of course, were character specific as well, which offered amazing combo potential, mix up opportunities, and defensive options for characters. The V reversal is a move you can perform out of block stun to quickly get your opponent off of you. It was one of the main defensive options in the game before V shift was implemented, where players could quickly dodge away from opponents' attacks and punish them for it. The combo system in this game was a lot easier for players to pick up, due to most combos having a lot of leeway for players to input them correctly. You can almost mash combos out and still receive the desired result. This did end up lowering the skill gap in comparison to previous games in the franchise. Seeing as though combos are the easiest part of fighting games, it didn't change the competitive aspect of the game too much. The general mind games between players is still real, and no matter how many combos you know, if you can't land any of them on your opponent, they are worthless. What makes current fighting games difficult for new players? The simple answer is that fighting games are designed with an opponent right in front of you at all times. You need to adapt in real time with no other outside variables coming in between the fight. If you look at a first person shooter, for example, you have tons of outside variables to consider when playing the game competitively. Things like other players, firefights, the layout of the map, and random hazards like grenades take control away from the player. In those games, there's nothing you can do to prevent random grenades from landing near you or getting headshot by a sniper who is waiting patiently for 5 minutes for whoever to pop out in front of them. Sure, you can get advantage of these deaths off of a respawn, but that random factor will always be a part of the game, and this is completely different from fighting games. Your chances of winning only hinges on your ability to read and react to your opponent's actions, as well as effectively execute your own. It becomes a back and forth of understanding your opponent's tendencies and devising a method to overcome them. As a result, fighting games feel difficult because of the amount of information involved in playing them. There's a lot to be learned both from the game's mechanics and the individual characters. The sheer amount of depth of all these elements result in an exceptionally challenging style of game to master. What can you do to become a better player? One thing most people don't understand is that actual fighting is hard. It only makes sense for games based around fighting to be hard as well. Just like in anything you want to learn, you need to start from the bottom. The one positive thing about this, though, is that skills in fighting games carry over from game to game. This is why you see competitive players able to switch from one game to the next and still perform at crazy high levels once they understand the game's general mechanics. The first thing you can start to do is to learn the game's mechanics. For example, in Street Fighter V, the V-Gauge system is one of the most important mechanics in that game. They offer so many options that players need to take advantage of. In trying to learn a new game, you need to ask yourself questions like, what kind of game am I playing? Is it a traditional fighter, anime fighter? Other questions are like, what kind of play style do you like? Are you like a rushdown player, zoner? Another question, which characters should you be playing? You know, of course, I was talking about in another video, character archetypes. I'm going to pin that right at the top here. You want to know what archetype your characters fall into so you can have that same play style and still have a character that you enjoy. The best part about fighting games nowadays is that information is widely available to you. If you want to learn a new character, There are hundreds of videos on YouTube or people on blogs trying to help break down all the character it has to offer for you. This is completely different from years ago where all you can get information from was just word of mouth. All of the hard work has been done for you. You just have to put in the effort and put that information into practice. And that is it for the video, guys. What do you find most difficult about fighting games? Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this in the future. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, hope you have a great rest of your day.